Caden Curry is a player I have been high on for a very long time, and he is wasting no time impressing coaches leading up to the start of his freshman year at Ohio State. What are some things the coaches are saying about this young talent? I'll tell you right here on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes, part of Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Thursday, July 7th in the year 2022, and I want to thank you for making Locked on Buckeyes your first listen or even first watch of every single day. On today's episode, we will hear some things Terry McLaurin had to say as he praised Ohio State during a recent press conference, and we continue our Buckeye road trip around the NFL, getting upcoming season expectations for former Buckeye who is now in New Orleans, Mr. Bradley Roby. But first, Caden Curry. The hype was real while he was at Center Grove High School in Greenwood, Indiana, and the hype keeps building leading up to the start of his freshman year at Ohio State. Ohio State has been blessed with numerous amazing talents at the defensive end position. You can go to the Bosa brothers. You can go to Sam Hubbard. You can go to Chase Young. Zach Harrison, say whatever you want to do. He is a good football player who is a starter, has been a starter at Ohio State. You can talk about some young guys who are now sophomores, JT Tuimoloau, also Jack Sawyer. Well, Caden Curry's coming in at a time Ohio State has a new defensive coordinator. Larry Johnson is a long-time defensive line coach who has a great track record of recruiting and developing really good talent on the defensive line. And there's a new position at Ohio State that might fit Caden Curry very well. And it's all because of the things that he did in Greenwood, Indiana in high school, and also things he's been doing this summer to prepare for his career at Ohio State. High motor. I mean, you say it about a lot of players, but do they really possess that? Or is it just a talking point? These are things that coaches are saying about Caden Curry. He has a high motor. He has a quick first step. He's a little surly. That is a little quote from Jim Knowles about this young man. He is bigger than he looks, and he has quick twitch. I was actually fortunate to watch Caden Curry play numerous games in high school. I actually got to see his last game in high school as the Center Grove Trojans won the state championship this past year. And so I'm there watching him play, and I remember seeing him play against Cathedral. It was literally like a top 25 matchup at the end of the year. In 2020, got to see him win the state championship, play in numerous games where he went off. I mean, smooth off. And Caden Curry always impressed me. 6'3", 250 pounds. You might say, Jay, was he always on the outside or was he on the inside? You know, high school they don't always have the heftier players for the interior of the defensive line. I watched this man play nose tackle. I watched this man play 3 tackle at the D tackle. I watched him play outside D and hand in the ground. I also watched him play in a 2-point stance. Very versatile. John Garcia Jr. and myself have talked all about versatility in recruiting and how Ohio State loves these players. Well, Caden Curry is that guy. I remember leading up in his recruitment, and people were saying, oh, he's a D tackle. He's a D tackle. I'm not projecting that kid be no D tackle at Ohio State based off of things that I have seen with my own 2 eyes and say, oh, he's a D tackle. He might play that right now in high school based off some things that him and his coach Eric Moore, have talked about and said, it's the best thing for you right now is to play interior, knowing you'll probably play on the exterior of the D-line at the next level, which is very true, which I think is one of the things Larry Johnson likes about Caden Curry. Caden Curry is a player that if you need him to, which you're probably not going to need him to do this at Ohio State, he could bump inside, being a 2-point. I've seen him playing a 2-point stance at nose tackle, literally. Sometimes one technique shading the center. I have seen this man do these things with my own 2 eyes. Yes, 6'3", 250 in high school. Well, how did he do it? It's leverage, baby. His pad level was always consistent. He was always aggressive. He kept his motor high, like these coaches have already seen. And it even goes to how Caden Curry kind of fashions himself in some things that he did when he was younger to prepare himself to be a better player. Here are some things that Caden Curry said about himself. And you know how kids, when they were younger, they played up and played against older kids. Well, Caden Curry was one of those guys. Quote, "When I was a little kid, I was always playing up to my brother's age groups. They were 2 grades older than me. That kind of gave me that mindset from an early age that I've got to get out there and work for everything. I have to get out there and outwork everybody. So I've kind of just had that motor on the field of just wanting to beat everybody, not letting anybody get past me or anything. I've kind of been that way all my life." He goes on to talk more about himself and what he does on the football field. Quote, "I feel like when I get out on the football field, a little switch turns on in the back of my head. I kind of just let everything go out of the way for a second. I'm just focused on football, and I don't really care. If I've got to hit you anywhere, I'm going to do it. I mean, to get past you," end quote. I love that mindset. I mean, that's what you want from a football player. This isn't the old school days. This isn't, well, it's not the old school days when all the ways people used to play and the hits people used to make. Yeah, they were doing things that you can't do now. No, but he's doing things legally inside of the rule book that he can do to take advantage of his physicality, his work ethic, your inability to beat him in a one-on-one matchup, and just taking care of that every single day. Now, this is July. If he's impressing coaches right now, when Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson are heaping praise about this young man right now, just wait until he's able to get on the field consistently and show off the skill set that he has been blessed with and that he has worked for. Will he be a hand-in-the-ground defensive end? Absolutely. Will he be a stand-up two-point stance defensive end? My guess is yes, for 2 reasons. 1, Jim Knowles wants him to do that. But 2, he has experience doing that in high school. And if he can take that same thing from high school to college and build upon that skill set, baby, oh baby, just you wait and see what Caden Curry does when he gets on the field consistently at the Ohio State University. Coming up next, Terry McLaurin in a recent press conference praised Ohio State for numerous things and talked about some things that happened in practice as well. You will hear what Terry McLaurin said right here on Locked on Buckeyes. This episode is brought to you by RockAuto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand the warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to RockAuto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using RockAuto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? RockAuto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to RockAuto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Terry McLaurin recently signed an contract extension with the Washington Commanders worth a 3-year, $71 million contract extension. That man got paid. He is coming to the NFL, done phenomenal things, and he is someone that is regarded as one of the better wide receivers in the National Football League. And a player like Terry McLaurin, he could easily, not saying it would be right, but he could easily not discuss things that happened at Ohio State and say, well, yeah, that's where my training happened. That's where I went to school. That's where I got coached. But baby, this is all me. That's not Terry McLaurin. And that came up in a recent press conference while he was actually responding to a question about Denzel Ward. And Denzel Ward's a former Buckeye, contract extension with the Cleveland Browns. Now, Ward got that bag, baby. He got that bag. A 5-year, $100.5 million contract extension. I know many of you Browns fans are happy that he is sticking around in Cleveland, Ohio. You also might have some interesting thoughts about them getting rid of Baker Mayfield. Some of you are happy. Some of you are sad. Some of you are just neutral. Some of you are just trying to say, let's wait and see what happens. I'll tell you this. They'll go on with Terry McLaurin. Y'all got Jacoby Brissett. Baker Mayfield is better than Jacoby Brissett, but y'all kind of burn that bridge with Baker from what I have seen. And so if Jacoby Brissett got to play because Deshaun Watson is not on the field, I mean, it is what it is. That's all I'm going to say. But while responding to a question, I don't know where that came from, but while responding to a question about Denzel Ward, Terry McLaurin had this to say about being an advocate for what goes on at Ohio State.
I'm always going to be a big advocate for Ohio State because it's the way you're prepared for the real life world after football, whether you were blessed enough to go to NFL or you're going to be a CEO one day. You know, Ohio State really prepares you on and off the field to be a real-rounded human being.
We have seen numerous athletes kind of say the same thing that Terry McLaurin said in a recent press conference with the Washington Commanders, and I'm not surprised that it came out, but I love the timing of it. While talking about a former Buckeye and player that you know very, very well, you are discussing and being an advocate of some things that happened at Ohio State while also realizing they're preparing you for things in the NFL, but also for a professional life if you're a professional in something that is not sports, but also real life in general, which goes into way more things than the sports you and I watch on a regular basis. May it be your family dynamic. May it be you being a husband or a wife. May it be you being a father or a mother, because Ohio State helps female athletes as well. Whatever it is, Ohio State helps you. And I think in that moment, it's very, very telling that, hey, it's the Buckeye brand. It's the Buckeye brotherhood. But the Buckeyes helped us prepared us for way more things than just those things that happened on the football field. Well, Terry McLaurin, in the same response, he went on to talk about some of the things that came up in the competitive practices the Buckeyes had. And while you watch and listen to this clip, think about some of the names that he talked about and just think about how loaded those Buckeyes practices were.
Competitiveness that it takes to survive in that environment, and that's why I felt like I was able to come into the league and be so ready, because I was going against guys like Denzel and Eli and Marshawn and Gary on every single day in practice. And then on the other side, we got Curtis and Mike Thomas and Paris and KJ. Like, it's just so many guys. It's like when you're around greatness so much, it bleeds.
Man, all those names brought back so many memories, but the way he ended that comment and that statement was true. When you're around greatness every single day, it bleeds. Now, in that bleeding process, you might be somebody that says, man, I don't want to latch on to and be a part of what they're doing. I love the success they're seeing, but man, that's some work, baby. I mean, that's a tough, man. This environment is work ethic that's needed to flourish in this environment. Man, that's not for me. And Terry McLaurin, one thing I like about him, he always stays humble. He seems like a very humble human being. He knows where he came from. He responds and reacts to the things that are in front of him, but he always realizes it's not about me. And crediting not only the offensive players in that response, but also the defensive players as well. Man, Terry McLaurin is the kind of guy I want in my corner. And the Washington Commanders, they got a good one. This also, we have done a lot of talking about recruiting for a very long time on this show, weekly with John Garcia Jr. Probably can't get him back on until next week due to conflicting schedules. But this is huge for recruiting as well. I mean, think about what Ohio State just did right now in 1 week with the 4 receivers that Ohio State has right now in their 2023 recruiting class with Brandon Ennis, Cardinal Tate, Noah Rogers, and Bryson Rogers. Think about that that foursome right there. Then you think about what is going on right now with Garrett Wilson in the NFL, Jamison Williams in the NFL, former Buckeye as well, Chris Olave in the NFL that just got drafted 10th, 11th, and 12th in this most recent NFL draft. And then you have guys like Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith, and Jigba, who will probably progress and get drafted down the road. This little infomercial that Terry McLaurin just had right now, this is going to be something that down the road, people can look back and say, there may be a high school recruit that saw this clip or watched what Terry McLaurin said or maybe read it in an article and said, he got that much money? Well, talking about somebody else that just got that much money, how much? Terry McLaurin, $71 million in his 3-year extension. Denzel Ward, $100.5 million in his 5-year extension. They're doing that right now. The NFL and Ohio State is still producing first-round picks every single year. It may not be a receiver that's watching this. Could be a quarterback. Could be a D lineman. Could be a linebacker. Whoever it is, Ohio State's currently doing some things that are special, and there could be young recruits that watch this clip or read this, some of his quotes in an article, and they say, I want to be a part of that. There's something special going on in Columbus, and I want to be a part of that. There's so many angles we can look at and take this and tackle and say, well, I like what he said here. I like that he said this here. So many different angles. But with there being recruits that are coming up and that are going to be announcing where they're going to be playing college football very, very soon, Jason Moore, defensive lineman, John Garcia and I have talked about him previously. His announcement's coming up very, very soon. There were other players, I believe another one, last name Reed, I forget his first name. He's going to be announcing very, very soon. Will Ohio State add more linebackers in this recruiting class? Olas Alanen and Samson Okunlola, 2 offensive linemen, the most recent names I just mentioned. They're going to also be committing very, very soon, or they have not committed yet. Guys that Ohio State is currently going after. This was an amazing infomercial for Ohio State recruiting, but also for everything. If you're a football player, you wanted to go to Ohio State, year 3, year 4, you realize, man, this football career, professional career might not be for me, but I remember what Terry McLaurin said about him being an advocate for Ohio State and how Ohio State prepared him for real life. And me being at this university, being on this team, it ultimately prepared me for real life as well. I can't call him T-Mac. There's only one T-Mac. Terry McLaurin, happy he's a Buckeye. Happy he got the bag. And I loved everything he said about those competitive Buckeye practices, about Denzel Ward, and also about him being an advocate for what goes on at the Ohio State University. What can we expect from former Buckeye Bradley Roby in year 2 with the New Orleans Saints? We'll discuss that next with Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. This is Locked On Buckeyes. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling, guys. I know you're probably doing it. And listen, they are good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious coconut brownie chunk puffs are only here for a limited time. Go to built.com right now, literally right now, to make sure you don't miss out. They're going fast because they taste amazing. Go to built.com and use that friendly promo code LOCKED15. That is LOCKED15, and you will get 15% off your next order. Once again, go to built.com and use that friendly promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off at built.com. The Buckeyes keep putting numerous defensive backs into the NFL. We just got done talking about one of Marshawn Lattimore, continuing our Buckeye road trip around the NFL. Today, it's not about another episode about Lattimore. It's about Bradley Roby. Second year with the Saints. Last year was his first year with the New Orleans Saints. Had a little interesting introduction to the Saints, and Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints and the Saints Wire is back with us to discuss what Roby did last year and what we can expect from him in the upcoming season. Ross, Will this man make a mark in New Orleans?
I got to tell you, listen, Bradley Roby has a lot of versatility. There's a lot of different ways that he can impact the team, right? You can play outside, you can play inside. You can kind of do whatever you want with him. The issue is that the Saints' defensive back room is so loaded right now that it's going to be tough for him to really find his spot. I think he'll make a roster spot, but it's going to be tough for him to find his impact spot. So where he really ends up making an impact on this team, where he can make his mark on the team, is if there's an injury ahead of him or anything like that, and he has to step in. Then all of a sudden, if you're the New Orleans Saints, you're going from a starter to a bona fide starter in Bradley Roby, a bona fide NFL starter at corner that can end up being your depth piece, which is a pretty unique situation to be in for the Saints.
Outside corner or inside corner? What's the best fit for him?
Yes.
Okay, I like it already.
No, that's really like what it is for him, right? Like last year, if you look at his snap counts from last year, in terms of total places where he played last season, 14% at defensive right corner, 28% at defensive left corner, but 18% in the slot. So it was the second most populated spot, was actually playing nickel corner and all. And so you have right now CJ Gardner-Johnson, who's the expected starter in the nickel corner, one of the better nickel corners in the NFL, one of the better trash talkers in the NFL as well. A lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to cover. But then you have Bradley Roby, who's kind of immediately right behind him as the backup nickel corner, but can also be a really valuable outside corner as well. The Saints for so long had guys like PJ Williams and Patrick Robinson, who are fantastic backup slot. And then PJ Williams turned into a really fantastic backup safety as well. But if you had to put one of those guys out on the outside, then all of a sudden you had some concern, a little bit of a liability. With Bradley Roby as your depth piece, that's not the case.
We have Lattimore on one side. Who's the possible other starting corner that Bradley Roby might not be opposite the other Buckeye playing corner for the Saints?
Yeah, the guy that bounced them last year would be Paulson Adebo. Last year, the Saints traded for...
Wait a minute. Wasn't that a rookie? Isn't that guy a rookie? So you're telling me that a vet got knocked out by a rookie? That ain't right.
It was Tekashi 6ix9ine, right? Like Paulson Adebo says, stupid, I'm not even going to let you have the chance. Because what happened was that Bradley Roby was traded from the Houston Texans over the course of the offseason before the draft. The Saints traded a future, which was actually this year's third-round selection. Then, in 2021, they drafted my favorite cornerback prospect in that class, which was Paulson Adebo out of Stanford, also in the third round. So there was no real compensation difference between the two players. You traded a third-round pick to get one. You used a third-round pick to draft the other. So what happened was basically Paulson Adebo ended up getting the start week 1 because Bradley Roby had a suspension to serve. And the Saints knew that before they traded for him. So Paulson Adebo comes in. He goes up against Aaron Rodgers, holds it down opposite Marshon Lattimore, gets an interception in the red zone, ends up forcing like a less than 50% completion percentage, a very low quarterback rating, and has this huge game, and then basically never relinquished that spot over the course of the 2021 season. So that's what forced Bradley Roby into more of this kind of depth versatility piece, which is still something that works out really well for him, but maybe a little bit different than what the original plan was when they traded to grab him.
What's his contract looking like right now, Bradley Roby's? How much time does he have left on that?
So he has a couple of different things. And basically what happened was that the Saints ended up restructuring his contract and kind of doing a contract extension at the same time this offseason. So he was walking into 2022 with like a $10.1 million base salary that was completely non-guaranteed. Going into 2022. So what the Saints did was that they restructured that contract. They ended up extending him basically for, I would say, 2 more seasons. So right now his cap hit is only at like $3.2 million, or excuse me, his cap hit's only at $1.7 million, but he still has about $10 million left to make. So they converted a bunch of that to a signing bonus, gave him a bunch of voidable ghost years and stuff like that. But then they really gave him an extension to keep him in from 2022 and 2023. So those would be the years that I would look at, and there's guaranteed money now in both of those years, which he didn't have before. There's a good chance that he's actually on the New Orleans Saints roster until he's 32 when he hits 2024, but the dead cap hit going into 2023 isn't so much that they might that they wouldn't be comfortable moving on from him at the end of this year. If they needed to, they could also move on from him before this season now that it's post June 1. But I think that the value in terms of what he brings and looking at his contract structure, the payment versus value of what he brings in 2022, they match up. So I think he'll make the roster in 2022.
And I bring that up because he's kind of venturing into that NFL journeyman or almost journeyman stage in his career. The age you mentioned, he was in Denver, got drafted by Denver, number 31st pick overall in the 2014 draft, was there, won a Super Bowl, was there for, I believe, 5 years, then 2 years in Houston. That was, I'm going to be delicate, there are kids listening, that was a hot mess. But now he's in New Orleans. Now, that was via trade, but now we know when you get up there, especially at that position at corner, especially with how the youth are being developed at that receiver position, you might want to get a younger guy in there, fresher legs, a little bit more nimbler, more flexible, not needing to go to the trainer after everything happens. You want those younger guys in there. So I'm asking about that because not only do I want him to play well this upcoming season, I want him to play in New Orleans because, one, I like the connection, Buckeyes in New Orleans, but Ross, I like talking to you. And I hopefully get to do this again next year with you and Bradley Roby next year in the offseason.
Me too, man.
He's at that stage where that journeyman tag might be on him, not because he can't be a good player on the field. I still think he has good football to play, but his age, man, those years, that wear and tear, that wears on your body, that's why I'm bringing up the contract. Because honestly, we're talking about this upcoming season, but you mentioned June 1. He might not even be on New Orleans in the fall because of the age, and they might find somebody a little bit younger to put and replace him with.
It's possible. They did draft cornerback Alontae Taylor out of Tennessee in the second round of this year's draft. But again, I think that, Alontae Taylor ends up coming in, maybe competing a little bit with Paulson Adebo, but he's going to be mostly, a core special teamer. He's going to be the guy opposite JT Gray as a gunner on the special teams unit. And so I think that you still have a carved out role for Bradley Roby. And if you look at the alternatives in terms of the guys that would end up standing up ahead of Bradley Roby, it's guys like Vincent Gray and like a lot of undrafted free agent rookies, a lot of very young and unproven talent. So at the top of the cornerback spot, you've got guys like Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, Alontae Taylor, and Bradley Roby. And then after that, if you want to, you could cycle PJ Williams into there as well, but he's been playing a lot more safety here recently. CJ Gardner-Johnson's a nickel corner, but he's designated as a safety. It's really like the top of your cornerback spots or the top of your quarterback depth chart is set for the most part. And I think Bradley Roby is a part of that. And because he was willing to take the contract restructure and the extension, I think that helps because we know that the New Orleans Saints, they really take a look at what's your role versus how much are they paying that player. And if that role is less than what they feel the contract value is, they will move on from that player. It's what happened with Latavius Murray last year. And so Bradley Roby taking the contract restructure tells you that they clearly identified to him, here's what we believe your role is, and here's what we believe you should be paid for that. And it looked like Bradley Roby and his representation were smart enough to say, we agree. No problem. And then they stuck around in New Orleans, at least hopefully for another year after this one.
Ross, last thing for you here pretty quickly, if you could. Do you think Bradley Roby is on the New Orleans Saints for the entirety, start to finish, of the 2022 NFL season?
Yes, I think he will be on the roster in 2022. It's next offseason that will be the big question.
Ross, this is always fun with you, man. Could you let everybody know where they can follow you on Twitter and then catch everything you're doing?
Absolutely. You can find the Locked On Saints podcast every Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube. You can head over to saintswire.usatoday.com to find all the written work. And of course, you can find all of that in one place over at Ross Jackson, NOLA, N-O-L-A on Twitter.
People think that I talk fast when I'm on the podcast. I know I talk fast at times. Once I get going and I get rolling, it's like the Energizer Bunny. Sometimes it just never stops. Ross talks faster than me. I listen to Ross's intros. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how Ross is so busy. I don't know how Ross is able to keep everything in his brain. One thing I do know is that I do enjoy having Ross on the podcast. I think you guys do as well. Unfortunately, the end is here. Ross, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I'll miss you. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you. Always a pleasure to be here.